this false narrative that had been built up, which was that, oh, the educated are going to lead this country, or that education is a great way to sort of solve the country's problems, and actually humbled you in a way and said, ki actually the person who's not even crossed a 5th standard education knows more about what's at stake for this country and for this democracy than you do.
How do you see, I mean, are you a shield to the party? Are you interpreting what they're saying for the world? Or are you building narratives for them? You know, what exactly is it? Does it mean to be a spokesperson?
You know, for the longest time, I looked at the role of spokesperson with disdain because I said, I don't want to be a talking head on TV.
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of these people who are towing the party line and defending everything that their party does, good or bad. The audacity of youth is that you can ask for such things at 27. Of course, I'm defending the party line, but if you've chosen me as national spokesperson, I'm also deciding the party. I will demand accountability. I will demand more CCTV cameras in schools. I will demand sort of implementation of the Shakti Act that we introduced. And I will demand for more honest action on sexual assault of children, particularly in schools, but I will not demand the death penalty. The need to be close to power comes from a recognition that without that proximity to power, you don't have the ability to serve the people that you're serving. And this form of cosmopolitanism was wonky. It wasn't based necessarily on the most effective principles. But today you're seeing, abuse becoming the new normal, name calling becoming the new normal. Even the chief minister goes and says things like, Rahul Gandhi ke dimag ka chip chori ho gaya hai. Sometimes I feel like Shah Rukh Khan's for this. Jo desh hai mera, you're sort of going abroad and then every time you're coming back. And when I want to feel very good about myself, I convince myself that I'm Shah Rukh Khan.
But apart from literature and academia, you also brought queerness to your party.
Queer groups came together with environmental activist groups to protest Bolsonaro's visit as Republic Day chief guest. And we said, Aare Amazon queer ladai, Bolsonaro Modi bhai bhai. In this oppression Olympics that we play, like who is more oppressed, straight woman or a gay man? I don't think these are good games to play.
What do you think that a poetic voice can do that policy documents cannot?
यार हमारे पास ना लोग पढ़ते नहीं हैं.
हाँ.
और वो बड़ी problem है. A document and a policy that had a soul was Manrega. Because Manrega said that the right to work with dignity is a fundamental right. The only policy even a BJP government has not been able to scrap and has to increase funding for year on year is Manrega. We're recording this very long podcast. I don't know how many of you are going to watch it till the very end. Most of you will watch 15-second Instagram reels and then share them in a very direct way. But and that's what you're dealing with.
Politics speaks in many registers. Sometimes of survival and command, sometimes of negotiation and imagination, sometimes of betrayal and desire. And a party spokesperson is not just a vessel carrying the weight of others' words, it also leaves its own traces. Today, we sit with Anish Gawande, the National Spokesperson of the Nationalist Congress Party, SP, also a writer, an activist, and interpreter of a shifting world, to wander through the seductions of politics, the ambiguity of power, the language of queerness, and the fault lines of democracy. Not to find any final answers, but to listen to politics when it speaks differently. Welcome, Anish, to the Soft Record. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you very, very much for having me and for that incredibly generous introduction of the vast array of topics we're going to cover and consider.
So. Well, then the first thing I want to ask you, most people like, a Rhodes Scholar, an activist, a writer, they usually stay at the edges of power, critiquing it. What made you cross over?
That's a choice that was made partly deliberately and partly accidentally.
Okay.
And I often say I'm an accidental politician because I grew up in Mumbai. I grew up in a non-political family. My father has a tax consultancy firm. And so very, very early on, I was very interested in politics because if you grew up like I did in Mumbai in the early 2000s, you were watching a very shifting world unfold in front of you. And the way of understanding that world was primarily through politics. You were seeing the impact of liberalization on my generation, the opening up of an economy, the opening up of a different world. And at the same time, you were seeing a shifting register in terms of the rhetoric of politics.
Yeah.
And for me, growing up, I was very concerned with what my place would be within this shifting dynamic. And I thought I would become an IAS officer. I thought I'd become a lawyer. And I thought I would go into professions that one conventionally goes into. But I stumbled into politics when I was still in school, where Milind Devra, who used to be the MP for South Mumbai, had a program for young people to volunteer as door-to-door campaigners on his election campaign in 2014. And in between my prelims and my board examinations, I found myself knocking on doors for the Congress Party in possibly the toughest election to work with the Congress Party. And that was a very humbling experience, because even as a 17-year-old, to have doors slammed onto your face and to have people so passionate about discussing the state of the country was a revelation. And one thing led to another. And as I worked my way through universities, I worked my way through degrees, I realized that at the end of the day, the reality was that to bring about tangible change at scale, the only solution was politics. And so we'll discuss a bit further of how that journey actually unfolded. But I found myself meandering through. One thing led to another. There were a lot of hurdles that came out across the way. I came out and I said that there's probably no possibility of me coming back to India and working in politics. But there was something that kept drawing me back. And it's now drawn me deep enough to now become national spokesperson. So
absolutely. And so you've said that you entered politics through a certain kind of an osmosis, and you were working behind the scenes and the shaping language, understanding tempo. So can you take us back through that time? What was the experience of writing speeches? And what did you understand about the language of persuasion at that time? How did you your relationship with language? How did it evolve then?
But I was always a debater in school, and I was doing a lot of theatre. So as a theatre wala, I was very excited by the possibility of performance.
Yeah.
But the initial experiences that I had in politics, first as a door-to-door campaigner for Milind Devra, and then when I came back to India in 2018 as somebody who worked very closely on the communication strategy, not just for Milind, but for the party at large, was one that allowed for all kinds of experimentation. It was a fun time, because suddenly you were in the midst of breaking news that you had to respond to very directly. We had the Maratha reservation protest that took place in 2018 in a very similar vein to which they took place just a few weeks ago in Mumbai. We had a growing farm crisis and a drought crisis. And these were all challenges that, of course, I had opinions on, but I didn't have considered opinions on. So it's very interesting to work with somebody like an Ashok Chavan, who I sort of worked with for 6 months before I joined Milind's campaign in 2019, to craft a compelling narrative that drew upon somebody else's life experience. So the learning that you can get when you're working so closely with a person to craft what they say and how they say it is immense. Because very often you're not getting that much face time with a leader otherwise. Right? So with someone like Ashok Chavan, who's been a chief minister of the state, who's led the Congress party into a victory in the state elections, who's also held important portfolios through his life and has been the son of a chief minister and traveled across the length and breadth of the state from when he was very young, was again this process of osmosis. I think in that process, of course, there are challenges, because you have to always remember that you're not writing for yourself, you're writing for somebody else, right? And there comes a point at which you recognize that you are speaking in someone else's voice, but it gives you a certain kind of discipline. And it's also a very sort of humbling experience, because you learn not to take yourself seriously or not to take yourself as important, but rather to see how you can piece together a lot of ideas that people have formed through interactions they've had with people, right? Absolutely. And so I think those experiences were very, very formative in helping me understand what it means to craft narratives. So I'll give you a story. We're traveling across the campaign trail and we were on this Janasangharsha Yatra. going across the length and breadth of the state, and you had the third consecutive year of drought in Maharashtra. And you were faced with a challenge because in 2018, newsrooms had faced budget cuts. There was no money for the media. You didn't have reporters going out onto the field in the same way that they did earlier. But still, you had this story that was incredibly important to tell not just the country, but the world. And of course, the party was doing a good job of telling the story in Marathi. But the challenge was, how do you communicate this to an English language audience, right? How do you convey agrarian distress to a audience that is very divorced from agrarian distress and does not understand the contours of what farmers' crises look like, including audiences like me that had no idea, right, of what a drought really means at the ground level. And so it became in many ways, and I studied comparative literature much like you did for my undergraduate degree, and I often joke I studied Senegalese linguistics in the 1960s, and so my degree has very little, if anything, to do with what I do today. But what that degree taught me was how to engage in a process of translation. And that process of translation was important when you were writing a speech for somebody, because you were translating their voice into something that was going to work in a medium that they were otherwise not comfortable with. But the process of working behind the scenes in politics was also a process of translating what you were seeing as an outsider to a world that was also an outsider to the crisis at hand. Absolutely. So, you know, I remember the most important thing at that point was to craft a press release that was going to be impactful. Print media was still important at this point. Unfortunately, I don't think that holds true anymore. And I don't think the skills that I learned there are very applicable anymore. But that's what you do, right? You hone a skill and then you hope that it's useful for very long, but very often it isn't. And some learnings pass forth. But this exercise in translation was very exciting because it allowed me to take 3 or 4 sort of rallies that were being held throughout the course of the day and say that the language that you use for a Marathi audience is going to be very different. The issues that are going to be important for a Marathi audience are going to be very different. But the register in which you convey them to an English language is going to be different as well. And so I used to sort of sit on my laptop in the middle of a sabha in Ichalkaranji and Pathardi with my colorful socks and kurtas like this, looking very different from everyone else on stage, and almost an object of caricature, if not of bewilderment for everyone around. And I used to sort of furiously type out a press release. And then people wanted it printed. And I was like, where am I going to print this? There's no running water in this village. Where are you going to find an inkjet printer? And so then I used to get the iPad and I used to sort of get this little iPad pencil and give it to Mr. Chavan, used to make edits over there. And it became a really powerful way of also ensuring that you created a system through which you reinterpreted what you were seeing, right? So, for example, I remember even now that the right to privacy judgment had just been passed. And the Puttaswamy judgment was very important. And we all assume this is an English language phenomenon and that people care about this in Calcutta or Delhi or Mumbai. But over the course of the campaign trail, what became very interesting is that one of the main issues was Aadhaar linkage. And people in the smallest villages and small towns were concerned. They said the government is going to enter your bathroom now because the government wants to keep a track on everything that you're doing. And so the stakes of what a surveillance state looks like and the implications of a surveillance state were more evident to a farmer in Nandurbar than they were to you and me at that point. And conveying that through a sort of press release that was obviously political in nature was an incredibly exciting experience. So it really gave you insights that you would not have otherwise had. And it made you question, particularly as somebody who grew up in a city, this false narrative that had been built up, which was that, oh, the educated are going to lead this country, or that education is a great way to sort of solve the country's problems. And actually humbled you in a way and said, ki actually the person who's not even crossed a 5th standard education knows more about what's at stake for this country and for this democracy than you do. So those sort of experiences were quite fun. You getting press releases out and you getting them out in record time, sending them to PTI. You were seeing them become front page news at points in the day, and it gave you an adrenaline rush like no other. And it just kept you going. And I still remember you could work 20 hours a day and not feel it. And you could really be up at any hour and responding to some crisis that had happened. A bridge has collapsed and you have to go there and you have to figure out how do you make this urgent and important. You had a flood that was taking place and you were figuring out how do you sort of provide relief and be humane, right? And not trivialize the matter or politicize it to a point of ridicule, but mobilize it to say that these are things that we should be talking about. So it became a fascinating space in which you put yourself second and really tried to become a translator of sorts for everything that you were seeing around you. And it really helped to be an outsider there because you were seeing things through a very different perspective than somebody who was doing this day in, day out and had sort of almost become numb to the implications of what they were doing.
I suppose that prepared you for the role that you are having now, which is of a spokesperson. And tell me the contours of that. How do you see yourself? I mean, are you a shield to the party? Are you interpreting what they're saying for the world? Or are you building narratives for them? What exactly is it? Does it mean to be a spokesperson?
For the longest time, I looked at the role of spokesperson with disdain because I said, I don't want to be a talking head on TV.
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of these people who are towing the party line and defending everything that their party does, good or bad.
Yeah.
Right? And it seemed almost, particularly if you came from academia or you came from a place of scholarship, a giving up of your own voice, which is the biggest sacrifice you can make. Because I said, well, I want to say what I want to say.
Yeah.
Not what needs to be said for a particular purpose. Right?
Yeah.
And
I suppose that choice had already been made when you joined a particular party. But anyway,
I didn't join the party, by the way.
Okay.
Till I became national spokesperson.
Okay.
For 10 years, I worked in politics without ever officially joining any political party. So I never joined the Congress Party. I often joke that the Congress Party sort of supported me, nurtured me, got me to where I was. But I was never a card-carrying member of the Congress Party and don't think I will be, given that I'm now in this party. But it was from this hesitation to affiliate with a party because it meant giving up your voice. When you're writing an academic paper or a dissertation, your pride is that this is my idea. And there's this focus on originality and having your own voice that is arrogant, quite honestly, and self important that you had to shed.
Yeah.
And to me, it became very important to navigate the role that I was given in a way that was both honest to myself, but also cognizant of the fact that I was representing a party, right? So when I was with Supriya Tai, who's my party leader, Supriya Sureji, and is a national working president for the party, I remember being at breakfast one day and saying, this needs to change, this needs to change. The party is not communicating in English. We're not getting our press releases out. We don't know what we're doing with our narrative in the English language media. And she looked at me point blank and said, then you fix it. And I was like, I've been working with you for 4 months. I mean, I'm 27 years old. What do you mean you fix it? I'm bringing the problems to you. Somebody else should fix them. And in that moment, I think it became very evident to me that the responsibility for fixing these problems is not on anybody else. It's on you. You cannot only sort of play the role of the critic within a political setup. Because if you're not going to do the work, then who's going to do it? So I was also like, chalo, I will take up this opportunity. And I said, okay, then give me a position.
Yeah.
And she said, what position? And I said, national spokesperson. And I think one eyebrow got raised. And I think the audacity of youth is that you can ask for such things at 27. And the privilege that you come with as somebody who's been in rooms where you're taught that you're important gives you the ability to demand what you think is right for you. And I saw her sort of just look at me point blank for 3 seconds, and she said, okay. And that was that. And I don't think when I took up the role, I really understood the implications of what it would mean to be national spokesperson for a party right as we were heading into the state elections, right? And I think there have been very, very difficult moments.
Yeah.
Because in many ways, I'm very grateful to be a part of a party whose ideology I believe in. We have a very strong tradition of a Shiva Shahu Phule Ambedkar legacy in Maharashtra. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Shahu Maharaj, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. And that tradition is one that is rooted in the Bhakti tradition of Maharashtra, in Tukaram and in sort of Bhakti poets. And it's one that is incredibly progressive, right? And so I was very grateful to be in a party rooted in these progressive traditions, because what it allowed me to do was to say that, of course, I'm defending the party line, but if you've chosen me as national spokesperson, I'm also deciding the party line. And that was a difficult thing to navigate as somebody who was this young, right? Because there were many times where in the middle of an election campaign, nobody has nobody has the bandwidth to monitor you constantly or to spoon feed you. You've been given the responsibility, you carry it forward. There are 3 of us who are national spokespersons for the party. And between the 3 of us, we were going on all the news channels and the debates and deciding the party's position on issues. And of course, that drew from what party leadership had said, but it also allowed you to craft a position that you could defend that was maybe not a carbon copy of what Pawar Sahib or Supriya Tai had said, right? And I remember 5 days after my appointment as national spokesperson, the Badlapur sexual assault case happened, where 2 children were sexually assaulted in a school in Thane district in Maharashtra. And it triggered off a huge political storm, right? There was a Rail Roko Andolan, there were people coming out onto the streets, there was a lot of public anger. And the demand constantly was find and hang the rapist, right? Now that put me in a very difficult spot, because from ever since I can remember, I've been fervently against the death penalty. And it's a very close ideological position I've held, right? And it's something that comes from my belief in reformative justice. It comes from a belief that if we give up on even the worst criminals, then we're giving up on even the best people. That I cannot say that the death penalty is ever justified or the taking of life is ever justified, because then I'm considering the person who committed this crime to be beyond any kind of redemption. And there's something also deeply religious and spiritual to that, right? There's a way in which you cannot give up on the individual. And it's a position I held even for Ajmal Kasab, who was involved in a terrorist attack that shook my city and took the lives of friends and their families, right? And it was a position I took even after the Nirbhaya case, for the Nirbhaya rapists. And it wasn't a very popular position, as you can imagine. And I was very willing to concede that people might feel very strongly another way. And of course, if this is something that had happened to you or your loved ones, you would feel very differently about it. But it was a moral position to take.
Yes. So then
and the first TV debates that I was going on were all on Badlapur and this child sexual assault case. And I had a frank conversation and I said, you know what? I will demand accountability. I will demand more CCTV cameras in schools. I will demand the sort of implementation of the Shakti Act that we introduced. And I will demand for more honest action on sexual assault of children, particularly in schools. But I will not demand the death penalty. I won't outright say that I disagree with my party leader and I disagree with the death penalty. I won't take that stance either. But the middle ground is that I will never say, hang the rapist. And I'm very grateful that the party was okay with it. And I think that set the tone in some ways for issues that kept coming up in the days to come, right? And so even today, I mean, sometimes I'm like, acha, matlab, am I supposed to decide what the party stance on this is? Because on national issues, very often the party does not speak until the top leadership has spoken or your national spokesperson has spoken on TV, right? Because they're very busy with their own issues, local politics. So remember, even with the Ranveer Allahabadia case, for instance, it became a comedy of errors because here's a man, a podcaster who's criticized the Congress, who's criticized the opposition, who's criticized my own party, who's gone on record to support the government in all of its forms, and he's coming under attack. And suddenly you're faced with a crisis. What is your take on this? And I said, you know what? We're going to go ahead and defend it. Because it's a freedom of speech issue. And it's a logical issue. You want to start banning everybody, then you might as well start a Shut Up India campaign. Because you think that taking a video off YouTube is going to prevent people from seeing it. But this is the internet age. Taking something off is going to double, if not quadruple, the number of people who see it. So that's the stance that was adopted, and we became one of the first parties to actually come to Ranveer Allahabadia and Samay Raina's defense and said that regardless of whether you disagree with him, summarily deciding through a trial by media that some content should be taken out and some should be put in is incorrect. So it's been an exciting journey because I think the weight of the responsibility of that decision is on your shoulders because it can often be counterproductive electorally.
Yeah, I can imagine. For example, so do you think when in such times when politics is hyper-mediated, do you think the spokesperson is the new site where politics is being performed?
Politics is continuous performance, which is why as a theatre wala, I love politics, right? And I think the spokesperson can assume many kinds of roles. There are parties where the spokesperson is given a party line and they have to sort of reiterate it constantly and consistently. But what I've realized, and what I'm grateful to my party for, is that they've recognized that giving somebody autonomy, entrusting somebody with responsibility is more useful and more productive because you actually manage to articulate a stance better when you believe in it. So in some ways, as a spokesperson, you're also a politician, right? So you're also building a sort of identity for yourself, a base for yourself. And in an age where articulation has become the most important, we're living in the age of discourse, right? I think, and almost sort of Foucauldian multiplicity of discourses that generate more discourse the minute they're generated. The role of the spokesperson in creating new discourse is incredibly important because that's what's getting latched onto. A new perspective on something, a different take on something is very important because that's how you're setting yourself apart in this noise. Because earlier you had 5 newspapers and they would have the same stories on their front page and they would have a different take on them, and the numbers of opinions were limited. With TV media, they became a bit more democratized in a way that they expanded to having 4 people on the screen, or in the case of some channels, 16 people on the screens all shouting at each other. But in the age of social media, the number of opinions has multiplied to an extent that we don't even know how to quantify it or understand it, right? And so to cut through that clutter, the job of the spokesperson is to have a pulse or a finger on the pulse of what people think and to articulate the sort of various opinions that are coming on Instagram, on Twitter, on sort of WhatsApp forwards, in large meetings, and to condense them into something that people can resonate with.
Right. I would like to go a lot more deeper into this, and I want to ask you that, most parties, they evolved through learned habits. Like Congress has, it has the burden of legacy and lineage. BJP has the militant ideological control, that kind of the left has inherited, a certain sort of a doctrine. But how I see the NCP, it has pretty much been unmoored from any fixed ideological identity and pretty much driven by the force of its founder, his regional acumen or his instinct per se. So into the space, which is pragmatic, also is a bit dynastic and little opaque. What what did it actually offer you, deeply speaking? Which other parties did not offer you.
We
How
get
do
called
you?
out for being opportunistic all the time, but I'm like, we're the only ones who stayed on this side of the political spectrum, despite having all the opportunities to go the other way, right?
Yeah.
The chance to go to the BJP existed for decades. But Pawar Sahib has consistently and constantly maintained that it's important to have an ideological mooring, even if you are seen as playing opportunistic politics, right? And the reality is that the political economy of a state like Maharashtra depends upon the state to support the people who are voting you into power, right? Ours is a primarily agrarian party. We function primarily in rural Maharashtra. And we've realized that the core way in which you can support the people who matter is through cooperative farming, cooperative lending. So district cooperative banks, sugarcane mills are very important. Of course, they're important politically because they employ a lot of people. The people who sort of run these sugar mills or run these cooperative banks are often the ones who also enter politics. But they enter politics because they're directly impacting the lives of crores of people. Right? And there's a way of negotiating with the state which involves the recognition that the state owes a burden of responsibility to these farmers as well, to these sort of small business owners as well. So the state is building a 13,000 crore rupee coastal road in Mumbai. It must also allocate the same amount, if not much more, to banks that are lending to a Maharashtrian farmer in Solapura, Satara. Not as a matter of favor or charity, but as a democratic right, And so, this extends to a variety of issues. Right? So, MSP is a good example. MSP has been criticized across the board. It's a subsidy, farmer subsidy, wasted money. But a position we've taken is that MSP amcha hakkachi, nai konacha bapachi. MSPs are right. Nobody's sort of father's jagir that is being given to us as a favor. Because if you're subsidizing urban elites by building roads for multi-crore rupee cars to drive on, then you subsidize the farmer as well, who's actually providing the food that is on your table and giving this country food security, right? So in some ways, the affiliation to the state and the need to be close to power comes from a recognition that without that proximity to power, you don't have the ability to serve the people that you're serving. Right? And that proximity to power, to give both Pawar Sahib credit and in some ways even Ajit Pawar credit, when he's been in the government now and our fierce political opponent, comes not as a sort of request. It comes as a demand. That you're going and saying, no, you must allocate funds here because it's your duty. These are also your people. It doesn't matter if they voted for you or not. But they are your constituents now that you won. If you're the Minister for Agriculture for Maharashtra, you're the Minister for Agriculture for all of Maharashtra, not just for BJP voters. Right? And so that's a logic that's been incredibly important. It leads to certain political complications, right? So there's an argument to be made that Pawar Sahib got back into an alliance with the Congress Party too early after splitting the party from the Congress Party. It didn't allow us to grow in the state in the same way we could have if we had a separate identity. It didn't allow us to create a sort of ideological mooring that we could have created if we had a distinct identity from the Congress Party. But even within that alliance, I think we've really managed to carve a space for ourselves. Right? So, three things that I think differ substantially compared to other parties with the NCP-SP are a very strong grounding in a literary ideological tradition. Right? So I still remember the first time I went to Supriyata's house in Pune. What I was struck by immediately was that the pride of place in the living room was occupied by a bookshelf with thousands of books. And the first question I was asked is, what are you reading? I hadn't joined the party then. I was still finishing up college and sort of navigating and meandering my way through the political sphere and getting advice on what should happen next. But the first question asked was, what are you reading? And the first advice given was, read this book, and a book was handed to me.
What was that book?
It was a I can't remember actually because this was very, very long ago. But if I'm not wrong, it was a book on Tukaram's Abhangs. It's Sant Tukaram, who was one of the Bhakti poets of Maharashtra and a fervent advocate for reform. I think that was the book handed to me, and it's remained very important because very recently we started a campaign that said, which was led by our state president at the time, Jayant Patilji, which said that the fight in India today is Tukaram versus Nathuram. Right? The ideology of a Bhakti poetry that has sustained and nurtured progressive politics in this country for centuries, not just decades. And an ideology of a Nathuram Godse, which believes in violence, which believes in division, which believes in hate. And so that mooring is very literary. Shiv Shahu Phule Ambedkar ideology, Tukaram and other Bhakti poets, and nurtured through, and this is the second thing that makes the NCP-SP very interesting, nurtured through institutions. We've always believed very strongly in nurturing institutions that are not political. So the Yashwantrao Chavan Center in Mumbai, it's an incredible space that is open for everybody across ideological leanings, right? To debate, to discuss. There's an auditorium, there's an art gallery, there's meeting rooms, and they're let out at very, very low rates to anyone who wants to use them. There's the Nehru Center in Worli in Mumbai, which again serves as a similar space. Pawar Sahib sits as the chairman of the Rayat Shikshan Sanstha, which is one of the largest educational organizations in the country that provides free or subsidized education across the state. Right? And so institutions are very important because you recognize that the important bit is not to promote yourself, but to promote a culture of free thinking that will ensure that your voter will vote for you only because the other side is not promoting it. So even now, Pawar Sahib sits in a press conference and addresses every single question until every single person has asked these questions. And it's a big challenge for me because sometimes I was telling the party, listen, it's an attention economy of 20 seconds. In an Instagram reel generation, you're giving a 2-hour press conference. How am I supposed to write a press release? You covered like 300 topics. But the importance is, no, we will answer every single question because that is the sort of spirit under which you should operate. And the third thing that really sets the party apart in many ways, is, of course, a sort of a dynastic politics that has led to Supriya Tai succeeding Pawar Sahib as the leader of the party. But also a strange inner party democracy that functions in a very different way to other parties. Right? So even today, if you go to Mumbai, or you go to Delhi, or you go to Baramati, or you go to Pune, and either Supriya Tai or Pawar Sahib are in one of those spaces, every morning, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., anybody, you, me, a party worker, a journalist, somebody who's come from the World Bank, can go and meet them at their house. No questions asked. You write a little chit. In fact, if Pawar Sahib is in the YB Chavan Center in Mumbai throughout the day, you can just call up and ask Pawar Sahib there. You write your chit and you go in. I remember after the Pahalgam attacks, I had gone to Kashmir to sort of lead a delegation to say ki dharam se baatoge to dharam se judenge. We went to the Shankaracharya temple, we went to the Makhdoom Sahib Dargah, we went to the Gurudwara, we went to Holy Family Church, and it was an important gesture to show that secularism can also look like this. And on coming back, as someone who's definitely very low in the pecking order in a party like this, I went to the YB Chavan Center and I said, I want to brief Pawar Sahib on this because he's been very involved with Kashmir. And for 30 minutes, he sat down and he listened. And so it's a party where, of course, you've got a sort of patriarch who's holding the party together and is the reason why millions of people across Maharashtra support the party. But you also have an open door policy, which is based primarily on listening. He speaks very little. He gives his opinion, but rarely. But anyone who wants to come to him can give their opinion. And so a culture of listening that exists across hierarchies. It's not that, only the MPs or the MLAs can come speak to me or somebody important can come speak to me. Anybody can come speak to me. Right? That culture of listening is very important. That really has allowed me to also find my own feet in the party, but also to say that in a party, we are all colleagues. I'm not working for you. I'm working with you. And there's respect because you have experience on your side, you have age on your side, you have the work that you've done on your side. But there's never subservience.
Right. But I also want to ask you, Maharashtra has always been a paradox. While it gave us, the searing legacy of Ambedkar, radical politics of Phule, it also is a stronghold of Hindutva.
The RSS headquarters in Nagpur are right next door to Diksha Bhumi.
Exactly.
So, you are in a state of contradictions.
And while it gave us cooperative socialism, which is today scarred by agrarian crisis. So, where do you locate yourself in this kind of a fractured legacy as someone who now, comes from, and now speaks for a party which is born of this soil?
The ideological contradictions that have existed in Maharashtra for centuries have allowed for a very different approach to conflict than in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. Savarkar is a contested figure in Maharashtra, is a very sort of polarizing figure in Maharashtra. And often attitudes towards Savarkar are either you can love him or you can hate him. But you'll find a large number of people in Maharashtra, for example, who are staunchly secular and progressive, who can say, Savarkar was a good poet. What he did with the Marathi language, the ways in which he transformed the language are remarkable. I disagree vehemently with him on his politics and on his ideology and on his Hindutva. But I can find a way to still appreciate his poetry. Right? And you've lived with these contradictions. A city like Mumbai was cosmopolitan long before other parts of this country. And in fact, Calcutta and Kolkata is an incredible example of a kind of cosmopolitanism that existed long before the newer urban cosmopolitanism that you're seeing in a Gurgaon or a Hyderabad or a Bangalore. Right? And this form of cosmopolitanism was wonky. It wasn't based necessarily on the most effective principles. You could be terribly Islamophobic in your discourse, but have a Muslim business partner who you celebrated Eid with, right? You could live in sort of ghettoized communities, but still celebrate every single festival. And someone said very brilliantly, I can't remember who said this, but India is a country divided by religion, but united by festivals. And there's something beautiful about that, right? That how do you find a shared vocabulary to communicate with even those you disagree deeply with? And Maharashtra has been a pioneer in that in some ways. But that space is shrinking, right? So you're seeing the advent of a resurgent, violent Hindutva that is more eager to cancel people than to welcome them into its fold. You're seeing a scenario where anyone who disagrees with the government is called an anti-national, urban nakshal, dismissed completely for their opinion. And you're seeing a worrying dumbing down of political discourse. We're becoming stupider because we're dismissing somebody because we don't agree with them. And that's fractured the political fabric of the state, which at one point used to be known for bipartisanship and often criticized also for bipartisanship because everyone would say, look at them, they're yelling at each other in the assembly, but they're all having dinner together. But you were known for that. The political culture of Maharashtra was known for that. But today you're seeing, abuse becoming the new normal, name calling becoming the new normal. Even the chief minister goes and says things like, Rahul Gandhi ke dimag ka chip chori ho gaya hai. I mean, this is not the kind of political discourse you had in Maharashtra, right? And for me, as someone who's also been a historian, as someone who's been very fascinated and invested in the archive, it's important to remind ourselves that it was not always this way. So my role in this is sometimes as a young person who of course is surrounded by people who think that this is the normal, to also be the person who goes back in history, who goes back and reads the speeches given by Yashwantrao Chavan, the first Chief Minister of Maharashtra, and says, this is what a sort of cooperative federalism looked like in the 1960s. To go back and say that this is what a negotiation with urban local bodies looked like in the 1970s. To go back and say that this is what the Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation, the richest civic body in Asia, functioned like. And to say that we can bring that back in some ways, and of course in a modified way, because those times were not perfect either. But to bring back in some ways the ethos of what it meant to craft a new country, a democratic country, that we seem to have lost, in this rat race, in this desire to become a 3 trillion, 5 trillion, 50 trillion, 60 trillion economy. We've forgotten what it means to care. We've forgotten what it means to actually pursue a politics of care that reaches out to every single person you represent. And bringing back that politics of care is something that I take very seriously, and I think is my goal within the whole political space. Right? I'm not a grassroots politician. I'm never going to pretend. I often tell people I'm not a policy person, I'm a politics person. I don't understand policy. I'm not an expert on AI. I'm not an expert on agrarian policy. I'm not an expert on anything. What I am good at, though, is bringing all of the experts together and finding ways for us to talk to each other. And that's the fun part of politics that I enjoy.
I just want to stay a little bit more with Maharashtra. And, it has always been positioned as the front line of federal resistance. But does it still hold true? Or has it become a state which is consumed by electoral arithmetic, splits, mergers, crossovers?
The problem is in Maharashtra, the BJP, which spent so much time splitting parties, splitting families to become sort of chief minister, has forgotten that after you become chief minister, you have to govern. So the challenge in Maharashtra today is, you have no problem. You play your politics, you come to power, by hook or by crook. But after coming to power, don't forget that you should also govern. With every problem that is presented to the government in Maharashtra, the argument is, Nehru ji ne kya kiya? Congress ne kya kiya? Sharad Pawar ne kya kiya? The name Sharad Pawar must have been repeated more times when we were in opposition than it was when we were in power. Now, this is outrageous, right? That on one hand, you systematically try to eliminate regional parties across the country. In West Bengal, you want to eliminate the TMC. In Maharashtra, you want to eliminate both the Shiv Sena and the NCP. In sort of the South, you're bringing them on board as allies. And I feel bad for my lovely friends in the TDP, who I respect very immensely, because I think that they walked into a trap, because the goal of the BJP is to bring a regional party on board as an alliance partner, only to decimate it a few months or a few years later. Right? And so the goal is very simple: to completely dismantle the spirit of federalism that we fought very, very, very hard to integrate into the fabric of this country. And it wasn't always the case. It's not always been a fight only against the BJP for federalism, right? It's also been against the Congress. And in fact, one of the earliest fights for federalism was against the Congress Party. And regional parties have consistently said that a centralization of power helps nobody, because it leads to the kinds of decisions that you're seeing made in the country today that don't reflect the reality of this country, which is one that is rooted in complex nuances that not a single person in Delhi can understand, right? Two people in Delhi cannot decide what you wear, what you eat, where you go, who you love. These are considerations that are very, very important to negotiate and navigate at the local level. And so Maharashtra has been a pioneer not just in federalism at the state level, but also at the urban local body level. Right? Our mayors have been more empowered, our civic bodies have been more functional, our panchayat system has been more robust, our Zilla Parishad system has been more robust than many other parts of the country, but that is being systematically dismantled because it prevents a concentration of power. Today, the Chief Minister's office in Maharashtra is staffed by hundreds of people, and every single file goes to the CMO before it's approved, regardless of what ministry it is a part of, regardless of what project it is pertaining to. Why should this be the case? One, it's practically impossible. Because then you're giving a bunch of 20-year-olds the power to decide whether or not a scheme should be sanctioned for farmers in Marathwada, or whether or not public toilets should take precedence over sort of highways. And it's a situation that is alarming, because it means that those who've been democratically elected, people who have gone to every corner of their constituency to get votes from every section of society, are being silenced, including those in power. Look at the national level today. Tell me one ministry at the national level that is empowered enough to take decisions on its own, perhaps except for Mr. Gadkari, who seems to have a longer leash than others. But other ministries, we can't remember a single large-scale program that is not Pradhan Mantri something. PM Shri Schools, Pradhan Mantri Swachh Bharat Yojana, Pradhan Mantri COVID vaccine with Pradhan Mantri photo. I mean, it's a joke. How many schemes can a Pradhan Mantri launch? ये सर्कस चालू है यहाँ पे, और वही प्रॉब्लम है. तो आप देखने जाओ तो फेडरलिज्म का मुद्दा is not just limited to Maharashtra, it's not just limited to states, it's also limited to one level below that. No money is currently being given to states. GST तो आपने ला दिया, GST के पैसे कब दिलवाओगे? You have great GST council meetings and everyone is technically supposed to have a voice. But your opposition is just noted and overruled. Right? And you're creating a very dangerous situation in such circumstances. Because the people in these states are going to say, we don't support such a model. Because the money that we contribute, our taxpayer money, is being misused.
I want to come to a little bit of a personal register here, and you've moved between Colombia, Oxford, and international spaces of policy and critique, and now you're deeply rooted in the Maharashtra ecosystem or the Delhi power chambers. So what does that shift feel like, not just rhetorically, but in everyday politics?
Sometimes I feel like Shah Rukh Khan's for this. You're sort of going abroad, and then every time you're coming back. And when I want to feel very good about myself, I convince myself that I'm Shah Rukh Khan. But jokes apart, I think in some ways, I'm incredibly grateful to have the opportunities that I did. They come from a place of privilege, right? I come with class privilege, with caste privilege, with the privilege of growing up in a city compared to growing up in a sort of village or in a non-urban area. And those experiences have allowed me to travel the world, gain degrees in Senegalese linguistics, in intellectual history and public policy, and go to places from Colombia to Oxford. But they've also allowed me to recognize and understand that a sort of fancy education does not determine how good you are at your job. Right. And I've always believed that you must study what you love because you love it, not because it's going to be useful later on or because it's going to be productive later on. I hate this productivity nonsense. Do a degree because it's a functional degree. I'm a big critic of MBAs. Because I don't think they hold value, because most of what you learn on the job. Right? And it's been a difficult choice. In many ways, when I moved back for the first time in 2018, after spending 4 years in New York at Columbia, I was apprehensive. I'd come out of the closet. I was finally accepting myself for who I am after years of convincing myself that it's simply impossible to come out. And it seemed almost silly to come back to India, right? It seemed like I was jumping voluntarily into a fire that would consume me. And at that moment, I think, one, it was the stupidity and the audacity of youth, but it was also the backing of people like Milind, my own family, of mentors and close friends who said, you know what, try it out. Worst case scenario, find something else. And what these degrees gave me, what my exposure to an education abroad gave me, is in some ways a backup plan that many of us don't have, right? When we embark upon these risks. Young people don't get into politics because it's not a stable career. Tomorrow, I might not be national spokesperson anymore. My party might not exist anymore. We might not have a democracy anymore. We might not have a government anymore that is elected by the people, for the people, of the people. In that case, what do? You're suddenly in your 40s. You have no other skill set. You have no job. And you've been left to the wind, right? That's where the academia bit comes in useful. कि चलो कुछ नहीं बनेंगे तो प्रोफेसर तो बनेंगे, सिर पे छत होगा, पेट पे खाना होगा, पढ़ाने के लिए स्टूडेंट होंगे, और क्या चाहिए? So it gave me that backup plan, but the reality remains that in many ways, the allure of staying abroad, the possibilities opened up by going out at night and partying till the wee hours of the morning in a city that doesn't shut at 1 a.m. like Mumbai does, or as I learned yesterday, Kolkata, which shuts at 12, were there. But they were so insignificant compared to the change you could bring about here. And the positionality that you had back in your own country, where your ability to be a catalyst for change was so high that it seemed almost impossible to stay back. और हमेशा मेरे साथ ये होता रहता था. I was in the US and I was like, no, I'm going to stay on here now. Give up this dream. Don't pursue it. After I came back in 2018, 2019 election, we lost so badly कि मतलब मुंह दिखाने लायक नहीं थे हम. You had just lost 2014, you lost 2019 also. I mean, forget anything else. Your competence was under question, right? तभी scholarship मिल गई हमें, roads मिल गई, Oxford चले गए. 2 साल वहाँ थे, but that decision to leave was easier because Oxford has a population the size of my street in Mumbai. And so I was like, गाँव में कहाँ मुझे पहुँचा दिया है आपने? And I hate nature. So I was like, ये क्या लोग? I don't want to go on a park. I don't want to go on some walk to some meadow. Where is the bustling city life? Why is there nobody on the street at 10 p.m. on a Sunday? Like it looks like a cemetery. So वहाँ छोड़ना थोड़ा और आसान था. But the point I wanted to make here was very simple. It's that all of these opportunities opened up a lot of worlds that were very enticing. But the masti of coming back and being in a profession, a job that is so different every day was just too much to give up.
Did you ever feel like an outsider, because the kind of political ecosystems we have is so much based on familiarity and kinship? And did you?
100%. But being an outsider can sometimes be an advantage. One, you are an outsider in a setting where your being an outsider accords you a certain level of respect that others don't have, right? So in many ways, we're still an incredibly classist society, right? We're an incredibly sort of divided society. If you come from a city, if you just come from Mumbai, forget my degrees don't matter. Nobody knows what Colombia, Oxford is in most of the places I go to. But the fact that I come from Mumbai, someone from Mumbai has come to my village is a big thing. People take you seriously. They give you that respect. And that's important. And has it been hard in the political realm? Of course. Because politics in this country continues to be governed by sort of dynasty. It continues to be governed by wealth. It continues to be governed by sort of whether or not you have a large factory that you employ thousands of people within that allows you to gain that political capital. But that equation is shifting very rapidly. In an age particularly where regardless of whether you're a spokesperson or not, you can reach out to people directly through things like social media. At a time when standing up for people does not necessarily mean giving them money, but ensuring that the state delivers upon its promises. The ability for young people and those who don't come from these setups to bypass the sort of political leadership that tries to gatekeep opportunities and go directly to the people has never been greater. And that's why I'm very grateful to be in this party, right? I'm not trying to suck up to any big leader. I'm not trying to say कि मैं किसी का मतलब चेला बनने वाला हूँ और ऐसे ladder चढ़ने वाला हूँ. Because I'm a little too proud for that and I'm a little too arrogant for that as well. So I don't like this G huzuri politics that unfortunately is all too common. And I'm very grateful. The first thing Supriya told me was, please don't follow me around. And I was glad, because otherwise what happens is you just become like a way to get to another person.
Yeah.
You become a power broker. And that's not useful for your party. And that's not fun for you. You know, sure, you have some access and you have some ways of making a name for yourself and maybe some money as well. But there's no point to that, because in the long run, if your leader decides that you're irrelevant, then you're thrown out. And for the party, you're not growing the party stature because the leader is capable enough of growing their own stature. They don't need lackeys like you to follow them around. Right? So this directly reaching out to people has been very useful. And in the most strange circumstances, right? So, you know, very recently I was approached by somebody over email who said that there's a tiger at the Tadoba National Park who has been injured. And this tiger was not receiving the medical care it required. And it required public pressure to get the government to even consider giving it medical care. But now they've assigned a human orthopedic surgeon instead of a veterinary specialist to work on a fracture. Now, I mean, in many ways, मैं कौन होता हूँ tiger संभालने वाला, right? But I could reach out to somebody at the forest department. I could reach out to friends who are working in conservation. Be like, Acha, listen, how do we piece this puzzle together? Like, this is important. We're going to work on this. And that is moving forward, right? And it feels incredibly empowering to be a part of that change. You know, recently, another time I was called up by somebody who said, the bank is evicting us from our flat because of a sort of misunderstanding where the person who sold us this flat had a mortgage already that they didn't disclose to the bank before selling us this flat. And they're going to come and take possession, right? And I could call up somebody at the bank. I could call up the lawyer who was tasked with the recovery and say, this is not acceptable. And the heft that comes with the position that you have already ensures that people at least listen to you. And so you build slowly that way, right? You gain political capital in the most unusual ways. I never thought that standing up for stray dogs would get me more popular than coming onto every TV debate. But it was an issue I cared about deeply. And I said, no, you know what, actually, I have a position that I can use towards whatever ends I want to. And to give my party credit, they did not once stop me. And I said, no, you know what, I will join the protest. I will get beaten up by the Delhi police as well. And stand up for what I want to stand up for. And that's when people start supporting you. And once people start supporting you, all of these networks of kinship, all of these networks of political privilege cannot afford to ignore you.
You also, apart from literature and academia, you also brought queerness to your party. Although I'll
correct you, yeah. My party had Queerness long before me. They started an LGBT cell.
Yes, they do have an LGBT cell, but I haven't really heard much about it. But yesterday you were telling me that, you know, that the queer movement in India is pretty much, you know, it remains elitist, and the trans, the working class still struggle as much. So what exactly is the shape of the queer movement in India today?
So I'll answer that in two ways, right? Yeah. The first bit is that the trajectory of the queer movement in India really took shape as a national movement over the course of the fight against Section 377. Yeah. Right? And unfortunately, that came with its own drawbacks. It was fought in the courtroom, which meant that it was automatically elitist, because who has access to the corridors of power in the Supreme Court? We know very often that thousands, if not lakhs of people are languishing in jails without trial, let alone bail, while a case on LGBTQ plus rights gets heard on priority. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, or one is right or the other is wrong, but it's a question of privilege that we must confront. That it was because of this sort of collective privilege that came with class, caste, and sort of regional privilege, that the movement could build itself up. Of course, it didn't have the same privilege as other more privileged movements did, which is why it took more than a decade for change to actually come through finally. But as the movement moved through the courtroom, the discourse around it became one that was predicated on an expansion of access to rights. It became that the movement stood for a lot more than just the right to have sex. It was about the right to a life with dignity. And even though it began as perhaps an elitist movement, it brought within its folds a rights-based discourse that expanded the number of people associated with the movement and the diversity of the people associated with the movement. Right? In some ways, however, we fail to reflect the diversity of that original movement in the queer politics that we see playing out against or in front of us today. Right? So, after 377 was finally struck down in 2018, after the Nalsa verdict was given in 2014 and the Trans Act was put in place in 2019, we've struggled, right, to accommodate that diversity, to find a common language, to say, what does it really mean to have a queer movement in this country? And I'm hopeful today that we will arrive at some sort of understanding. Because we have great examples from the past. Right? Someone like Baba Saheb Ambedkar stood up for R.D. Karve, the editor of Samaj Swasthya, who published articles on homosexuality and on birth control before independence, when nobody else would stand up when an obscenity case was filed against Karve. And the only lawyer to stand up for R.D. Karve was Baba Saheb Ambedkar, because he understood that dignity was at the heart of this movement.
But he also said that rights without redistribution are hollow, right? And
exactly. And that's for him at that moment. Redistribution did mean redistribution even to the homosexuals, right? Because he said that I cannot say that the rights must only extend to Dalits. They must extend to all other marginalized communities. It's the same spirit that led Namdev Dhasal, who used to head the Dalit Panthers, to march to Sharad Pawar's house when he was chief minister, with sex workers, which included trans women from Kamatipura, to demand a sort of protection from moneylenders who were exploiting them. Right? Core economic issue coming together with queer rights, which remains the case today, where trans people mostly depend upon begging and sex work for their survival. It remained the case when Shabnam Mausi won her election as an MLA from MP, becoming the first trans person in this country to become an MLA. On a platform that was anti-Hindutva and was bringing together different kinds of marginalized groups together, right? So we have to remember the Kamla Jans of this world who became the first corporator as a trans person. We have to remember the Shabnam Mausis of this world. We have to remember the Namdev Dhasals of this world, and we have to remember the Ambedkars of this world to craft a new rhetoric for the queer movement in India today that is rooted in very material challenges that queerness sort of confronts, right? Can we work together with other movements to push for a comprehensive anti-discrimination law? Because today, just the same way in which gay people are denied housing in urban metropolises, Muslims are denied housing. Single women are denied housing. Heck, even bachelors are denied housing. So if the straight men are going to be on your side, you'll really build a movement that's unbeatable. So that's the power of building a movement like this, right? One that's built on solidarity, one that's built on allyship. You saw glimmers of that during the CAA protests. You saw women, queer and trans-led protests against CAA and RC. You know, during the RA forest movement in Mumbai, where we were protesting the cutting of the RA forest, queer groups came together with environmental activist groups to protest Bolsonaro's visit as Republic Day chief guest. And we said, RA Amazon queer ladai, Bolsonaro Modi bhai bhai. You know, these were the naras that came up, and that was a radical imaginative potential of queerness at the point. And what queerness has to offer today, and not just sort of learn from, is an inflection point in a politics of imagination that we've forgotten to truly encapsulate or capture. Because we have to reimagine what politics looks like today. वो घिसा पिटा narrative नहीं चलेगा. कुछ नया चाहिए. Going back to discourse, लोगों को कुछ नया चाहिए. बोर हो गए लोग scroll करके. आप उनको वही चीजें देते रहोगे जो 20 साल पहले प्रॉमिस कर रहे थे, वो नहीं सुनेंगे. आप नया क्या दे रहे हो? How are you reimagining what our societies look like, what our cities look like?
What is the queer cell of NCP doing in the meantime?
You know, incredible work. So
Yeah.
it's led by a fabulous trans woman called Priya Patilji. And she's been a powerhouse, right? So right from getting more queer people to join the party as a whole and supporting queer people who are already in the party, the queer cell, when we were in power, was also the LGBTQ plus cell, which is a very important cell in the party, was responsible for getting the transgender welfare board sort of introduced in Maharashtra in 2020. I was part of that meeting with Ajit Dada Pawar, who was Deputy Chief Minister then as he is Deputy Chief Minister now. And immediately 5 crores were sanctioned from the Social Justice Ministry for the Transgender Welfare Board. And an in-principle approval was also given for a helpline for young LGBT people across the state that was trilingual, English, Hindi, Marathi. Helplines never seen the light of day, but, the Transgender Welfare Board exists. Has the board done its job? No. Has it functioned effectively? No. But change is incremental, right? And so the LGBTQ plus cell has been very, very useful in sort of advocating for LGBTQ plus rights in Maharashtra. Can more be done? Absolutely. But you do have certain challenges when you work within an organized political setup. But when you have a leadership that does not dismiss your identity immediately, the possibilities of what you can do while advocating for your identity are almost limitless.
Tell me about the pink list. What is a list like this? Do you think it actually holds people accountable, puts a certain pressure?
Sharad, I really hope so. I really hope so. I don't know. It was an experiment of sorts, right? Did very well. Got a lot of traction. It was very useful during the pandemic when we ensured that LGBTQ plus friendly MPs were going to then support the creation of wards for trans persons, isolation wards for trans persons in COVID isolation centers. It was very useful during the marriage equality hearings where we presented a brief to the Supreme Court on marriage equality, where we argued that the government's position is that Parliament should decide, but the government is only not letting Parliament debate and discuss marriage equality. It was very useful in individual cases where we had trans women who had not transitioned and who wanted to undergo gender affirmation surgery and needed leave from government jobs come to us, and we could find out which politician could help them in those circumstances. So I think the possibilities for Pink List were greater. We're a very small team. We're all volunteers. We didn't have the funding or the resources to do the work that we wanted to do at the time. Perhaps we will find that funding in the near future. But in a strange way, right, the momentum that LGBTQ plus rights had in 2019, when the Pink List was created, has dissipated today. And so you can only hold politicians accountable when there is a sort of core group or a core mobilization that exists to put pressure on these politicians. I think the work that Pink List India needs to do now is less tracking politicians and tracking what they're saying, which is important, and that work has obviously been carried out. But now reimagining ways in which you engage with newly elected members of parliament and tell them that, maybe you should take up LGBTQ plus rights, not as a favor, but as one of your duties and responsibilities. It's an evolving organization. It's an evolving mission.
I also want to ask you, something that Indian politics is clearly, a hyper masculine space. Even politicians like Mayawati or Mamata Banerjee have been, they are supposed to perform power in masculine coded ways. And somebody like Manmohan Singh, who's had a softer voice, was deemed to be weak. So in such a space, what do you bring in there? Do you think you are able to change the emotional vocabulary of Indian politics in a way, or do you think that you feel the need to kind of code switch at times?
To use Dr. Singh's words, I think history will remember all of us kindly.
Yes.
Even if the present doesn't. But in politics, the navigating of the present can often put you in scenarios or situations that you're not entirely comfortable with, right? Now, I'll give you some examples. Now, for me, politics is masti, right? I think you can't take yourself too seriously, and you can't take the role you occupy in the political arena too seriously either. You're doing theatre. Politics is performance, right? So you have to recognize that in a performance, if you're an actor in a play, you're not your true self, right? You are performing. In politics, you perform with a little more conviction, although that seems less and less relevant with every passing day, where the conviction seems to have disappeared. But you're doing with more conviction what you would do as an actor with less conviction from a point of view of what you believe. Which means that you have to be practical and pragmatic. If I'm going to a sort of village in Hisar, Haryana, I'm not going to go in hot pink shorts and a tank top and flip-flops with a baseball cap put on backwards, right? I might wear that in London, but I'm not going to wear that in Hisar, Haryana. So I'm already changing the way I dress, right? To suit the occasion or the room that I'm in. Not because I want to be inauthentic, but out of also a mark of respect that you don't want the other person to be uncomfortable, or you don't want to just set up a weird situation in that room, right? In a similar way, you navigate and negotiate how much of your queerness is put out, right? For me, that's meant never denying that I'm gay, right? I'm very out. I'm very publicly out. I'm on a podcast. I will always talk about being gay. I'm never shying away from it. But it will also mean that I will not necessarily tell people I'm gay unless it's important to that conversation, right? And so navigating your queerness in such a space can become a learned sort of strategy. But it's not something that only queer people have to face, right? I often joke that, yes, I'm the only gay man in most rooms that I'm in. But at least I'm there. Most of these rooms don't have women, right? So a gay man got his foot into the door before a straight woman also could get her foot into the door in most of these rooms. So it makes you question, like, what in this oppression Olympics that we play, like, who is more oppressed, straight woman or a gay man with privilege? And I don't think these are good games to play or valid sort of ways to navigate identity, but that's the reality, right? So, of course, I'm navigating my queerness and having to navigate it in these rooms. But women are having to do it. Adivasi people are having to do it. Dalit politicians have to do it all the time. Caste, class, religion, region, race, identity, ethnicity, all matter, right? And you have to find a way of ensuring that you can speak to a larger audience beyond your own identity group, because that's what politics is about. I can't ignore you. You might be a homophobe, you might be a transphobe. I mean, it's been hilarious. Once somebody told me, don't mind her, I'm gay-phobic, to my face, and I laughed. And I said, but don't you think everyone deserves equal rights? But he's like, no, but I went to the US and I went and saw two men kissing, and I said, you don't have to worry. This is India. Men and women can't kiss on the streets. Exactly. Two men are not going to be kissing anytime soon. Each other. So you have to take it in its stride. You have to be funny about it sometimes, and you have to grow a thick skin, because you're not going to get protected by anybody or sort of have someone come up to you and be like, oh, so sorry that this happened to you. That's not how politics works.
I want to understand your inner experience of politics. Like, how does your queerness kind of shape your encounter with, say, ambition?
It's deep questions are being asked today. But I think I have a very self-deprecatory sort of humor. And I don't take myself too seriously ever. And I think that's sometimes a result of queerness making me believe that I'll never really be able to achieve great heights in politics or be able to really succeed. And it's also a product of not really knowing how far I can get, right? And whether or not that ambition is even realistic. And so in those scenarios and circumstances, very often, I think before I came out, I tell people, "Mujhe PM bana, I'll become the Prime Minister." And even today, if you read some of the comments on some videos that will be like, "Anish for PM," or people will say this to me, "You want to see you as the Prime Minister of this country." And I don't know how to respond to that because it seems so absurdly bizarre to think that's even possible. I mean, you never had an openly gay person elected as a city councillor in a municipality, right? To think that a gay man will lead this country as Prime Minister, to me is only like, होगा ही नहीं, तो फिर सोचना है क्यों है? And that has its advantages and its disadvantages. It allows you to be completely khulla. I'm like, I don't care what car I rock up in. I come by auto to the office in Delhi very often. I don't care about like whether I have like 5 people around me all the time being like, "Acha, ye damdar aadmi hai, aa gaya, someone important has entered." So don't take yourself too seriously. You're like, you know what, I'm doing what I'm doing. If you respect me for what I'm doing, you respect me. If you don't respect me, chalti ka naam gaadi. But the disadvantage is that often it takes you much longer to get half as far as somebody else with that kind of raw ambition who also comes from privilege gets to. Like a straight man in politics, if you ever met straight men in politics, they have like an amazing level of confidence. वो तो already CM बन चुके हैं उनके दिमाग में. And I'm like, wow, आप अभी पार्टी ज्वाइन करके, मतलब आपको पार्टी ज्वाइन करके 1 साल नहीं हो गया, आप CM बन गए आपके दिमाग में. And that's sometimes good. You need that kind of fire in your belly to really take the audacious risks that you need to take in politics. But धीरे धीरे हम भी सीख रहे हैं. Write a book, Learning How to Think Like a Straight Man.
So do you think you've softened the space, or the space has hardened you a bit?
No, I think I've softened the space.
Yeah.
I think I can't let it harden. I don't want to be hardened by the space. Right? I think for me, again, a politics of affect is incredibly important. That an affective politics that confronts the horrors that you see unfold in front of you is incredibly important. I still remember during the pandemic, I think it bothered me. It truly bothered me when I was getting phone calls from Delhi asking for oxygen cylinders and I couldn't do anything. And even to this day, like, I think it's one of my most like mortifying memories. I still like get almost paralyzed sometimes when I think about the lives that were lost at that moment because you simply could not do anything. And in many ways, when you have an affective politics that drives that ambition, instead of one that comes from any other source, it's not only more authentic, but it also feels more sort of justified. That you don't want to be in power to serve yourself, but and this sounds cliched, but you want to be in power to ensure that somebody who calls you gets a bloody oxygen cylinder, right? And that somebody doesn't get evicted from their house. Because you really want to be able to help out there. I don't give a damn about what car I drive in or whether I'm going to get a Range Rover or a Land Rover. Right? It does not matter to me. And the most effective politicians I've seen, and the ones who truly succeed, right? Because in politics, the churn is higher than Bollywood. So, neta aate hai, neta jate hai, they're in power for a while and they're very important and then they're forgotten. When you observe that churn up close, and I was grateful to have observed it for 10 full years, right? From the sidelines, not as somebody inside the system very directly. You realize that in the short term, that kind of ambition, which is just grounded in real politics might get you far enough, but it'll bring you down also as quickly. Whatever disagreements you might have with her, whatever you might think of her politics, right? Mamata Banerjee is an example of how truly sort of throwing caution to the wind pays off over decades. There's a strange fire in her, right? That there's a willingness to get beaten up, to go in her same Hawaii chappals and sari and still walk on that treadmill and take videos and still not enjoy life, of course. I'm not saying you have to become some saint or say ki hum bhi fakir aadmi hai, jhola lekar chal pade like Pradhan Mantri ji. But there's a way in which a sort of mad commitment to power for something beyond just making money or building wealth. Like it takes you much further. You don't become chief minister otherwise. Whether or not you're good at using that power, completely different question. Whether or not the decisions that you make once you have that power are right or wrong, completely different question.
Yeah.
But you won't reach that level of power if you're only obsessed with power for power itself.
You also said that, politics needs more poets. But, what do you think that a poetic voice can do that policy documents cannot?
यार हमारे पास ना लोग पढ़ते नहीं है.
हाँ.
और वो बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है. One of my dearest mentors in politics is Tamilachchi Thangapandyan, Sumathi Akka, T. Sumathi, who's the Chennai South MP from the DMK. And she's a poet herself. And I remember the first time I went and met her, we were discussing Pink List India and sort of trying to get her support on LGBTQ plus issues. And that barely took even 2 minutes. But again, in her house, I discovered that she had a very large library. So we started talking about poetry. And we started talking about John Donne, the Victorian poet, and about the flea and the mischievous sort of naughty romantic poetry of the Victorian era, and about how it dealt with love and romance and desire, and about pathos and sadness and political upheaval. And it was incredible. We spoke, I think, for an hour on poetry, right? And the bond that I could get with her on poetry was far greater than the bond that I could get with a policy document. What is a piece of policy? It's a piece of paper. What is the emotional thrust of that policy? What is the underlying urgency of that policy? In a country like India, you can solve any issue you want. There are thousands of issues around. Why do you choose a particular issue? Why does it matter to you and to the people who you sort of speak out for, right? And are you willing to take it to its logical conclusion because you passionately believe in it? The problem is all the policies you see today don't have a soul. They might be good policies, but without a soul, they die. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Where is Bharat Swachh? 5 years, that's all we saw. Every hoarding was Swachh Bharat, Swachh Bharat, Swachh Bharat. 5-year program, khatam. Declared that India is open defecation free. Somebody should travel on the Mumbai local or even here in Calcutta onto the streets and see if it's open defecation free. And that policy died, right? In a similar way, Startup India, Startup India, Startup India, Startup India. What has happened? Smart cities, smart cities, smart cities. Go to Srinagar. What is so smart about the city? Go to Jaipur. What is so smart about the city? Nothing happens. Because if you don't infuse a policy document with a soul, it won't work. A document and a policy that had a soul was Manrega. Because Manrega said that the right to work with dignity is a fundamental right. The only policy even a BJP government has not been able to scrap and has to increase funding for year on year is Manrega. They criticized it when they were in the opposition. They mocked it. And now they don't have the audacity to remove it. They have to increase the funding, and they're shameless and won't even accept that they should give credit where it's due. Instead of saying ki 60 saal mein kya kiya. Because that policy gave every single person, even in a village in the middle of nowhere, the right to say ki this is my right to be able to be given 100 days of work, and I'm not going to be given a handout by you. I'm going to work for it. I'll build a road for you. I'll build a school bathroom for you. You know, I'll dig up a well for you. But I will do that as work that I earn money for.
Right. Also, I want to ask you, the political language today is, just rapidly collapsing into image, viral memes, and, it is so visual. And so what happens to depth there, and how does one, how do you create depth and, a slowness in a system that's only rewarding instant legibility?
I mean, this is something I struggle with where we're recording this very long podcast. I don't know how many of you are going to watch it till the very end. Most of you will watch 15-second Instagram reels and then share them in a very direct way. And that's what you're dealing with, right? Yeah. You're dealing with an attention economy that nobody knows how to confront. Advertising agencies are struggling. Politicians are struggling. Businesses are struggling. Professors are struggling, being like, student aa rahe hai, pad rahe hai, par kuch sun nahi rahe hai. Within 30-minute classes also, students are getting too distracted.
But podcast ki length और लंबी होती जा रही है, पता नहीं
podcast की length. Amit Verma is doing 4-hour podcast now. So
Raj Shamani
is doing 4-hour podcast now. But podcast की length बढ़ती जा रही है, and there are some consumers for that. There are some consumers for the shorter form. So in some ways, perhaps you're seeing an expansion of audiences, not a transformation of audiences. जो 4 घंटे सुन रहे थे वो सुन ही रहे. और जिन्हें 15 सेकंड सुनना है वो 15 सेकंड भी सुन रहे, right? In such a circumstance, conveying nuance, regardless of the medium that you're offered, is an art. What Mario Miranda could do with one sketch, or what R.K. Lakshman could say with one cartoon, I doubt that a 3,000 word op-ed or a 300-page book also can.
So you think poetry is effective?
Poetry is exactly, poetry appeals to me for that reason, right? In the art world. So I curate, I sort of write on contemporary South Asian art. And to me, the art world is important today because one, it avoids censorship. You've created something, line drawing कैसे censor करोगे आप? क्या censor करोगे? किस नाम पे censor करोगे? और कितना censor करोगे? Right? So maybe today the ability of us to create shorter forms of content that go viral and sort of disseminate before they can be controlled is actually the strongest bulwark we have against censorship. Nikalo, badlo, change karo, nikalo, badlo, change karo. So that's a skill that we have to develop. It's easy to blame the medium, but bad carpenter blames his tools. अभी आपको दिए गए हैं, इस्तेमाल करो, कुछ नया करो उनके साथ. One of the first few debates I went on was with Arnab Goswami. And he was remarkably kind to me, and I think he's been someone who's allowed me to speak more than he's allowed others to speak, although that's still not very much.
5 seconds more.
But there was a fair level of discussion also internally. Should we be going on Republic TV? What does it mean to support Godi media, etc., etc.? And I was like, bhai, jo bulayega wahan jana chahiye. You don't have the luxury and the opposition of choosing where to go, where to speak. That's a very personal belief. But over the course of that debate, there were 36 times we went, Anish, 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 Anish. And I was like, okay, मैं spokesperson बन गया हूँ, कोई debate तो नहीं देखने वाला. So I just cut all of those 36 things on like VN video editor on my own phone. And I made a little reel out of it for 35 seconds. I went viral. I said, I guess the nation now knows my name.
Yeah, that's smart.
She's like, क्या करे? मतलब लोगों को चाहिए वो दिलाओ ना. आपको शो पे बोलने नहीं दे रहे हैं. तो आप क्या करोगे? दिखाओगे कि this is the ridiculousness of what's happening. And in those 30 seconds, I said more than I could have said in this whole sort of debate that I did on that show, right?
Some kind of creativity is what you need.
मुझे तो पहला advice दिया था, which is a very good piece of advice. Said, देखो, तुम opposition के spokesperson बनने वाले हो. You will be seen more than you're heard. Use your face. React to what somebody else is saying on TV. So somebody is making a point that I disagree with, I laugh. I'm like, I'm smiling. And everyone's like, you're always smiling on TV. I'm like, yes, because now
It's something which Priyanka Bharti also does
yes,
so much.
because you just after a point नहीं चिल्लाना है मुझे आप पर, क्योंकि आप इतनी बकवास बोल रहे हो कि मैं आप पर चिल्लाऊंगा तो मैं मूर्ख लगूंगा because I'm even engaging with you. So I have to smile and be like, you're an idiot. And then the advantage is that if you don't shout at them, when they shout at you, and particularly if you're a young person, the person shouting at you is like 3 times your age most times. They look like the idiot. I'm like, auntie, aap mujh pe kyun chilla rahe ho? Uncle, aap mujh pe kyun chilla? I don't even have to say it. People are like, he looks like an idiot. I'm like, no, I think I take his point very clearly, but and immediately you change the tenor of the debate, right? Again, the form is not in my control. Anchors have immense pressures on them. The media has an immense pressure on itself. तो क्या करना है? मैं बोल सकता हूँ कि नहीं, मैं बॉयकॉट करूंगा मीडिया को, मैं नहीं जाऊंगा, तो मैं ही घर बैठूंगा ना. उनको कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा है. They'll find somebody else. A country of 1.5 billion people, population will never be a problem. So they'll find somebody else. So I have to ensure कि जहां जा रहे हैं वहां चमक के कुछ करके आओ.
You know, I want to ask you that there is this question of a burnout, because it is easy to enter politics with conviction, but it's harder to stay, with it throughout. So in the long run, it isn't about just elections or institutions. It is about weathering fatigue. So, and so many of, I'm sure, your contemporaries who were a part of the CAA protests, and they have very much gone into a lower profile or have completely gone into academics. What made you stay, and do you think you're here for the long run?
Therapy. I think it's very important, right? I think we forget very quickly to take care of ourselves. And if you're playing affective politics, then you are going to get affected, for lack of a better way to phrase it, right? And so again, right, like even things like the inability to get gas cylinder to oxygen cylinders in Delhi, sometimes the inability to actually get someone's sort of father admission to a hospital when it's critically needed, the inability to get somebody a scholarship form for the sort of scholarship they want to apply for because the central government portal is down. Things like these. Sometimes you fail repeatedly, right? And you're very bad at your job in the opposition very often because the systems that are meant to work simply don't listen to you anymore. And I think the greatest fatigue today comes from the fact that you're sort of banging your head against a wall because you're doing something that's correct, right? You're standing up for what is right. But the response is that because you're in the opposition, we're not going to consider your demand. And that's a concern. Opposition states get less money. Opposition MPs don't get any projects in their constituency. But even opposition voices are not taken seriously even when it's in the greater interest of the nation. Which is why my biggest problem with the BJP is that it does not put nation first. It does not put India first. Only sometimes will you see a delegation like the Operation Sindhu delegation being sent across the world to show bipartisan unity, but then they'll ruin the goodwill that they've created by politicizing it when the delegation comes back to the country, right? Why are you not taking any piece of advice given by the opposition seriously? I, complained about the metro not opening early enough. And I know this is a big Calcutta problem also because your metro also opens late on Sundays. And I was outraged that in Mumbai, the metro does not open until 8:30 a.m. Because it simply is unacceptable for a public transit system that connects the airport to the city to not be open until 8:30 a.m. on a Sunday. Now, thankfully, over there, I must give credit to the MMRDA and to Ashwini Bhide, who heads the metro, because immediately a change was made and the timing was revised to 6:30 a.m. because of a tweet, and it made me feel very important and powerful, but it highlighted that in some ways governance still exists on that sort of continuum of accepting good suggestions when they come through. But the reactions from supporters of the BJP were outrageous. Why are you traveling at this hour? You should have just waited for a bit. Why couldn't you just take a taxi? Why don't you take a bus to go to the railway station or take a train to go to your destination and take another bus? I'm like, Arey, then metro ki banda? You know, so the approach now is that if somebody is criticizing the government, they are ungrateful, they are wrong, they have to be shut down. Yeah. And that gets very draining. Because you're like, I'm not even making a political point over here. I'm saying, yaar, metro khuli rakho aap. You're in power. You have a 3/4 majority in the state. You have a majority at the center. The civic administration is controlled by you through an administrator because you haven't held civic polls in the last 5 years. Yeah. So what is the problem in doing work? Have you not been elected to do work, or have you been elected to sit in power? Right? So I think that can get very frustrating very often. But the burnout hasn't happened to the same extent yet that I presumed it would. But it's only been a year.
Yeah. So till now, what has been perhaps a moment of, the most serious moment of doubt that whether anything really shifts, and what stopped you from walking away then, if there has been any?
It's a difficult question. I don't think there have been too many moments like that, because I think, in all fairness, right, your moral compass takes a bit of a backseat when the adrenaline rush of being in a position of importance is still high. Now, currently, I'm excited to be on TV, regardless of what debate I'm going on. I'm like, acha, chalo, at least I'm getting to participate in this debate. One of the moments where I felt incredibly frustrated, I genuinely was just like, this is not worth it at all. And maybe we should just give up. Was when there was a huge controversy over Aurangzeb's grave in Maharashtra. And I wanted to pick up something and throw it at the TV. Because in a country where inflation, unemployment, market volatility, geopolitical tensions are all real issues, you want to dig up a 400-year-old grave that is an unmarked grave lying in the middle of nowhere in Khultabad that has harmed nobody. And the Vishwa Hindu Parishad is saying you will create a Babri-like situation if this grave is not removed. I was like, I refuse to engage on this one. And I was like, this is not a good faith argument to have. You want to create a Babri-like situation next to a World Heritage Site, which is Ajanta Ellora. You want to dig up this grave, which is part of a Sufi shrine, which has 300 other graves next to it. And you want to dig up this grave and do what? The Prime Minister himself goes and pays his respects at Bahadur Shah Zafar's grave in Rangoon, who is a descendant of Aurangzeb. Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj's descendant, another Shivaji, went and paid his respects at that grave, at Aurangzeb's grave, in his fight against Tarabai. Dig up their graves also. Anyone who spoke to Aurangzeb, their grave should be dug up. Anyone who dealt with Aurangzeb, their grave should be dug up. I mean, this is ridiculous. And it became national news for 4 days. And by the end of it, I said, I don't want to debate this anymore. And I said as much. And I think that, again, but that resonated with people. Right? There was an anger that I was like, I'm ashamed to be a politician right now. No, this is disgusting. Like, regardless of what party I am in, what party I'm not in, if I'm criticizing government, not criticizing government, you've all lost your minds. I think there have been times I've used phrases that are not really very dignified on television, but I'm saying the other side is using far worse. So I'm saying there's a point at which another controversy came up. Some Sanatan Dharma. What is your party line on Sanatan Dharma? It's like, have we lost our minds today? I don't have a party line on Sanatan Dharma. Political parties are meant to have a line on the economy, on agriculture, on why manufacturing is moving out of Maharashtra, not on Sanatan Dharma. You keep your dharma to yourself. No, you have a stance on Sanatan Dharma. What do you mean? What is your party stance on Sanatan Dharma? It's a 2-hour debate on Sanatan Dharma. This is what we're spending prime time television slots on. And so those moments are just ones where you're baffled, because then you're like, maybe this is what people want to watch. You're like, फिर मैं ही बेवकूफ हूँ, चिल्ला रहा हूँ इकोनॉमी के बारे में, चिल्ला रहा हूँ जॉब्स के बारे में, चिल्ला रहा हूँ किसी और चीज के बारे में. इसको देखना ही नहीं है, क्यों चला रहे हैं? हम भी हिंदू मुसलमान करने लगते हैं. So that, and the allure is there, right? The allure is that do this kind of politics and it pays dividends. It'll probably get you far. It'll get you sort of headlines, etc., etc. But consciously saying that, not worth it. Better to quit than to play this kind of politics.
So if you were to say leave politics tomorrow, not out of failure but out of choice, what would you do? And what would you write? And
पहाड़ों में जाकर किताब लिखता. I would just write, like, I translate poetry. I've been translating Ramchandra Siras's book of Marathi poetry into English for the last 5 years now, and it's been sort of slow progress because everything else keeps happening. I'd focus more on the art world. I would just meet so many people and travel and write little like travelogues of my diaries of being in different places and reflect upon everything that was happening. But politics to ek nasha hai, wo chhoota aasani se nahi hai. So now that I've jumped in here, I mean, I get to do all of these things as well, right? The beauty is that maybe the time to write is a little later. I keep telling you, I'm like, first I want to just absorb everything that is happening. Like, I feel like a sponge that is just soaking in all of these experiences. And I'm hoping I have time to reflect upon them at some point. But, it's a great privilege to be able to have all of these experiences and to be able to say, ki, I'm learning so much through them. So,
we just come to our last segment. It is sort of a rapid fire. We call it From the Subconscious Archive, where you don't have to explain too much. You just have to make either choices or give me one-word answers, whatever. Don't think too much. Just answer as rapidly as you can.
I'm Freudian from the unconscious archive.
Yes.
Maybe you will uncover things that I also did not know about
that's
myself.
Where absolutely. That's how you know a person the best. So the best political spokesperson India has seen, living or as in the past?
Definitely Majid Memon, who used to be the NCP-SP spokesperson a long time ago, and I'm going to take my own party spokesperson because I know them best. But DP Tripathi, incredible spokesperson. What wit, what candor, what charm. Rare to replace.
The one television anchor you'd never want to debate with again?
None of them. They're all very dear friends. I think every single anchor in this country is doing an exemplary job. They have their own pressures, but and I say this very honestly. I've told you, I sort of fought my own party on a boycott of Republic TV and my own alliance on a boycott of Republic TV. And I said, "Nahi, Arnab Goswami ki show pe bhi jana hai because it's important."
One literary line you'd borrow for a political speech?
I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. It's Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. That's very important because that's the truth. I don't know any of these people personally. They're not खानदानी रिश्तेदार नहीं है, कोई नहीं है. मैं उनको ऐसे ही मिला और उन्होंने हम पर थोड़े जो उपकार किए उसकी वजह से हम यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं. And you try to pass that on.
Absolutely. A political thinker you would want in every party office, Marx, Phule or Gramsci or anybody of your choice?
Very interesting. This is a difficult question from the subconscious or unconscious to sort of imagine a political thinker. And I say this again with trepidation because now he's not very popular, but Gandhi. Gandhi as a political thinker is undervalued. You might disagree with a lot of his morality, a lot of his other sort of ideological stances, but Gandhi thinks of politics in a way that one must engage with. You might not agree with it, but the sort of Gandhian inflection, very important.
The one slogan you think has aged badly? You did mention a lot, but there is a first.
Na khaunga, na khane dunga. You've seen the wonderful way in which that slogan is aged. 15 लाख आपके बैंक अकाउंट में नहीं है, 15 लाख हमारे बैंक अकाउंट में नहीं है. नए कानून आ रहे हैं और चीफ मिनिस्टर्स को जेल भिजवाया जा रहा है. But in the last 11 years, not a single BJP minister has gone to jail for corruption. So, actually it might have aged really well, because if we believe the government, then there's no corruption in India. New India is Bhashtachar Mukt Bharat. So,
okay. If you had to write a play on politics, would you cast it as a tragedy, comedy, or absurdist
comedy,
theatre?
because history repeats itself. First time as tragedy, second time as farce, and this is a farce we're seeing playing out. It's in front of us.
One word you'd rather the NCP never use again.
The NCP never use again. You know, I'm very, very tired of secularism. I'm tired. I'm like, it has lost a lot of its value. I think we need to reinvent that word. We need to find a new way of... Secularism as an ideal is great, but the minute you say secularism, unfortunately today you've lost the audience. So I'm hoping, from a communications perspective, chhod do shabd, naya shabd istemaal.
Sharad Pawar's pragmatism or Rahul Gandhi's persistence?
Sharad Pawar's persistence.
Okay.
Man stayed in opposition for longer than he ever was in government and worked hard from being a booth level party worker in Baramati to becoming Chief Minister of Maharashtra. If that's not persistence, I don't know what else is.
Gramsci's war of position or Lenin's war of maneuver?
Lenin's war of maneuver.
And last, political theatre, Shakespearean tragedy or Brechtian epic?
Brechtian epic, you know, I mean, theatre of the oppressed is what we all need to imbibe into our daily practice. And actually, with the Darashikoh Fellowship, we did a whole sort of workshop on theatre of the oppressed in Jammu, and played out brilliantly. So, Bertolt Brecht is more relevant than ever before.
Well, that was lovely, Anish. Thank you so much for this conversation. And we saw how words themselves can bend towards freedom.
Oof.
Thank you so much for the
conversation. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to all of you who are watching. And I'm so grateful to be back in a magazine that has shaped so much of what young India thinks and has played such a pivotal role in the cultural transformation of this country. And
thank you.
Excited to see it back in its new digital avatar, and only grateful to be a part of it here, and excited to contribute in whatever way is possible in the days and months to come.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.